we were firing some shots at you, Tom, before you got back. But speaking of shots fired, the Big Ten and ACC coaches, actually, Yormark fired. We didn't talk about this, but a couple of weeks ago, Yormark fired a pretty thinly veiled shot too. That wasn't as direct, but he fired a shot at the SEC's way. Cole, you can have the floor on this one first, but Cignetti talking about he canceled the. I will say, I think most of this stuff is said in jest, not to take over Cole's point. I think most of this stuff is said like in somewhat of a playful manner and got over the internet. Lashley's wasn't said in a playful manner. Lashley talking about how, the SEC is just very top heavy. It's not that good of a conference. In theory, he's maybe right, but they still have the best, or the largest number of good teams, even if you think he is right. But people firing shots at the SEC this week, Cole, not afraid to try and maybe combat some of the narrative of how great the SEC is. What are your thoughts?
Full story, bro. Continue to go ahead and talk down on the SEC because if you want to talk up on your conference. Listen, I have no problem with what Kirk Cignetti said because if he's somewhat right when it comes to the non-conference game, and I understand, you also play a game you play that extra conference game. So naturally hang on fast. Oh boy, I knew that one was coming eventually. You play that extra conference game that is always going to benefit you because if we say the 8 versus 9. Here's the problem that I have with it. I want you to actually go look at Indiana's schedule, especially when you look at it last season, and go through every single game in terms of strength of record, strength of schedule, and strength of opponent. Add all those. There was a reason why people were complaining about an 11-1 Indiana team making the college football playoff over several teams in the SEC. The problem is that when you look at the ACC and the Big Ten, they'll always have 3 to 4 teams that are very, very good. They're elite. I look at the Big Ten this year. I can guarantee you that Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon will be in the college football playoff, and they all have a shot at winning a national title. The problem is that you got to get to that 4th team. Who is that 4th team? Is it going to be Illinois? Is it Washington? USC? Will it be Indiana once again? Are they actually going to go through a gauntlet of games that signals they have a turning tide? And then the teams afterwards, yeah, you have a bunch of 8-4 teams. Yeah, you have a bunch of teams that are playing up to a certain level of competition. But you're also watching as these are underwhelming performances. You turn on a mid-level game in the SEC on a Saturday afternoon, South Carolina versus Missouri, you're going to have some fireworks and you're going to have two teams on any given Saturday beat up on each other and punch their way to a double-digit win season. You don't have that in the Big Ten. You have your 4 teams that are very top-heavy, and they're very good, and they're very talented at winning a national title, but then you go to the SEC, and you got 8 or 9 teams that are all competitive. They all could get to 9-3. They all could cannibalize each other en route to going toward the college football playoff, and that's the difference between these two conferences, which is why the SEC right now doesn't have that 9th game. Because I can and say, what's the reward of playing a 9th conference game? You cannibalize each other and then only get 2 teams in the playoff because if you're all 9-3 at the end of the day and you're not actually 10-2 where you should be in the playoff. So it's a negative in that standpoint, which I understand from Cignetti's standpoint. When it comes to the ACC, we're at number 1. Let me just remind you, you are entering year 2 as a member of the ACC. It's not like you have been a legacy team out in the conference for over 3 decades that had your opportunity to punch your ticket to the playoff. No, you had 1 year in the conference. And last season, when you played against a ranked team, you lost to a ranked team. That's an annual Saturday down in the southeastern region. Sorry, you may not like it. You may think that it's a little bit bullish that we see the same 6 teams playing for a conference title, but it's a normal Saturday to watch as these teams play against each other and they cannibalize each other. The other thing is that when you have these top-heavy teams and you're talking about diversity, you also fail to mention, hey, this South Carolina team went 9-3 last year. That's a change. Ole Miss has turned the tides. Every few years, they get to double-digit wins underneath Lane Kiffin. What about Eli Drinkowitz and what he's doing out in Columbia, Missouri at this point? Back-to-back 10-plus win seasons? Like, that is unheralded for a team that we can constantly being in the SEC. Meanwhile, you'll have a year where Miami goes 7-5, and then they go 11-2, and then they go 7-5, and then they go 8-4, and then they go 3-9, and then they go 10-2, and that's supposed to be diverse because of, oh, we consider this diverse. No, it's because it's inconsistent. It's not sustainable. Look at SMU last year. They went 11-1 in the regular season. Watch them go 8-4 this year. Then the next year they'll go 7-5. Then they'll pay a lot of money and they'll get the NIL funds. They'll punch their ticket to the college football playoff at 12-0, and then they'll go right back to being 8-4. That's not supposed to be the norm. You're supposed to have sustainable success, and you don't see that in the ACC. You see teams that have the one in a dozen year. It's awesome. They look the part. They fantastically put on a year that we will never forget, and then they go back to being an average roster. And that's the difference between these two. I got no problem with you taking shots at the SEC. I got no problem with you saying that the SEC needs to start playing 9 conference games. I have no problem with Kirk Cignetti saying that, hey, just follow the SEC mantra. It's going to be an easier pathway for you. Yeah, you're right. It is. But the reason why it's going to be an easier pathway for you, Kirk Cignetti, is because of your schedule doesn't feature 6 ranked teams back to back to back to back to back like Oklahoma. I promise you, Oklahoma and Florida this year are going to finish 8-4. They're going to be better than a couple of 10-2 teams in both the Big 12 and in the Big 10.
On Indiana's schedule, just very quickly before I give this to Tom, listen, I like Cignetti, and Indiana was a fun story last year that I think we all knew was going to go to the playoff and probably not have a great shot to win. Out of conference this year, Old Dominion, Nassau State, Indiana State. They do play the 9 conference games. They do have Illinois, Oregon, and Penn State on their schedule this year. Certainly not easy in conference. I still don't know that if I'd put that up against, like you said, Florida or Oklahoma's schedule. What I do like about this, and I think you have to be careful because you can quickly make yourself look stupid. And I don't know. I mean, based on where you stand on this, maybe some fans will think that they look stupid saying this. But I think I have no problem with this because you have to push back on some of the narrative, whether the SEC's right or not, of, man, we just get screwed because our strength of schedule is so strong that everybody else should just be disrespected and our strength of schedule should just be above everybody else. I will push back on that too, because I think the SEC does get a lot of benefit of the doubt for their strength of schedule. Screwed them one time with Alabama and SMU. And I really think that had to do more with SMU not being penalized for being in a conference championship game. But I think the SEC does benefit a ton from strength of schedule. There were two-loss SEC teams that ahead of a 1-loss Indiana. There was a 3-loss SEC team ahead of a 2-loss Miami. When you look at Alabama, would have been the first team in instead of Miami at third. And then you look at the year before, Alabama's strength of schedule helped them when it came to Florida State. So I think most of the time the SEC's strength of schedule does benefit them very heavily. And this narrative of, oh, we'll just stop playing tough games because if you're not going to respect our strength of schedule, we're out. I think the SEC's strength of schedule is respected, and the whole SMU Alabama thing just came down to not punishing a team that went to their conference championship. And so what I like about Cignetti and Lashley and anybody else who fires a shot is it is pushing back on some of that narrative that I think we can't get to a point where strength of schedule is the end all be all. And that's what I like about it. Now, were they effective in their methods? Was Cignetti probably half joking anyway? Yes, I would think so. Does Lashley have a point? The SEC is very top heavy. Yes, but they're still the best top heavy. So I think you could argue effectiveness as far as they're going after the SEC. I think they're just doing what's best for their conference and trying to push back on some of the woe is me because our strength of schedule isn't considered. I think the SEC strength of schedule is very considered when you look at basically every playoff ranking that's ever happened, minus the Alabama SMU one caveat that everybody's kind of focused on.
But also, what do you want me to say? Okay, I'm supposed to be this SEC standish and the SEC, we're burying you and everything. I'm not going to do that because let's just be real. You got to do what's best for your conference. No problem with Greg Sankey saying, I don't care what the ACC is doing. I don't care what Tony Petitti says about me. If it has nothing to do with the SEC, not my problem, bro. And it never is going to be my problem. So I can't sit here and be two-faced and on one hand say, SEC got to stand on business, but everyone else, go yourself. We don't need you to go ahead and be here. So it's I'm not going to be pissed off about that. What I am going to say is, don't be upset that every year the SEC has more ranked teams because of the addendums that go with it, like recruiting numbers, transfer portal production, your matchups against certain opponents, how well you perform, the average number of points per victory, the average margin of victory. Don't be pissy because of you have a 19-14 game between Minnesota and Nebraska, and it's down to the wire of, hey, we have 6 turnovers in this matchup and we rushed for 450 total yards on the ground combined. Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't sell me as a top 25 team when I see that consistently in the SEC. That's the only thing I'll say. But you got to do what's best to protect your conference.
Tommy, you might be on mute.
Did we lose Tom?
No, I think we got him. I don't hear his mic.
Did we lose? Dang it, we lost Tom.
Yeah, maybe it's not plugged in or a wrong setting. I'll talk a little bit until you jump in, and then I'll just shut up. But yeah, I've got no problem with the SEC pushing that narrative either. Like the idea of like trying to do what's best for you. Like people hate Greg Sankey. It's the weirdest thing to me that they get upset when Greg Sankey like goes out and I mean, he's just doing what's best for his conference. Like if any Utah fan was in the SEC, they would love Greg Sankey. Like you just hate him because he's not your guy.
Yeah.
Like he's not doing anything that's inherently immoral or wrong. He's just trying to push his product more. I got no problem with that. Right. Do I think he's right about everything?
There we go.
Tom's back. But yeah, I don't have any problems with that. I mean, I certainly have thoughts on the ACC's commissioner, but I think most of these guys are just doing what they think is best for their programs and their conference, right? And Lashley, Cignetti, Sankey, they're all in that boat. Tom?
What I think happened with Cignetti especially is I think the SEC kind of caught a stray in this one in that he was deflecting, and anytime Curt Cignetti is in front of a microphone, boy, is he bad and bold. I want to harken back to comments made by James Franklin circa 2018 talking about Penn State after a loss to Ohio State. He said, we've been a good program. We can be a great program, but we're not an elite program. Last year, Indiana had a great season. I think that's justifiable when you go 11-1, the competition, all that sort of stuff. 11-1 is a great outcome. You made the college football playoff. That's great. It has yet to be proven if Indiana is a good program. Historically, they've been an average to below average to bad program. When you get to the point that you are consistently a great or elite program, then yes, you can schedule, no disrespect, cupcakes in your non-con. Penn State has cupcakes right out the chute. Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. No disrespect, but we just talked about it. Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, lighter non-con schedule for the most part, and out of the Ohio State-Texas game, I'll acknowledge that. But for the most part, when these teams schedule non-con, they take it pretty easy. They've earned that spot because they have the talent consistently year over year that we're assuming they're all going to make the college football playoff. No one's assuming Indiana's going to make the college football playoff. There's the distinct possibility that they could do it. So, yeah, it looked pretty weak when they canceled non-conference opponents that were actually and incredible conferences within FBS. So I think more than anything, this is Cignetti continuing to talk a big game. I really don't see why he brought the SEC into this because it just brought more haters to his doorstep. But that's kind of his MO. For me, Indiana, the is still out. If you want to continue to do this non-con thing, it's going to bite you at some point because you're going to have an incredible in-conference record every single year. You haven't proven the ability to do that year over year. I understand there's huge investment into Cignetti and into the college football program for Indiana football, that is. But like, you haven't proven it yet. And you kind of have to do that over, I don't know, Cole, what do you think? 5 years consecutively to the point where we all are like, yeah, this is a great or good program at the very least.
But like also the other thing is that let's say that there are two teams that are gunning for a spot in the college football playoff. That non-conference schedule may benefit you even if you lose. Like let's say again, a team like Oklahoma this year. Oklahoma faces off against Michigan in week 2. And Michigan in week 2 may end up being a sleeper game. It may end up being the moment where we all see this version of Bryce Underwood come through and live up to the hype of, hey, I'm everything as advertised. He may end up being the next great quarterback in the Big Ten. But Oklahoma loses that game, and then they go on a run. And then we're having a conversation of, okay, well, Indiana played nobody in conference play and has the same record as Oklahoma, who had a loss in a close call against a Michigan team that is now in the college football playoff. You know who we're going to reward? We're going to reward the team that decided to schedule the opponent that may have ended up being a bit more challenging than those who just found their way to get to 10-2 and still crap the bed. Because also keep in mind, Indiana might have losses to Ohio State. They'll have losses to Oregon. They'll have losses to Illinois potentially. And that signature win. Meanwhile, Michigan is a loss to Oklahoma, but if you're 10-2, maybe your other loss is to Alabama, but you beat South Carolina, that went 9-3. You beat Missouri, that went 9-3. You beat Texas in the Red River Shootout, and they're in the college football playoff and playing in Atlanta. So there's a reason that non-conference schedule does matter. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go about it where do whatever's best for your team to get to the postseason, but it gives you less margin of error to be able to draw a game and then say, oh, well, you know what? We're in a big conference too. No, you're in a big conference that decided to schedule no names outside of your matchup, and you didn't meet the expectations in your own conference.
The funniest thing to me about canceling the Virginia series is Virginia has sucked for a long time.
You should win that game if you're any good.
Yes, 5-5, 6-6, 3-7, 3-9. 2019 was the last time they had a winning record. They didn't cancel a series with Bama or Clemson. Cole was talking about the AC. I meant to bring this up. The ACC basically just, the ACC being one good. Well, the one exception to that is Clemson. This wasn't Clemson that you took off the schedule. You took a bad team schedule, right? So that's the weirdest thing is you could have gotten an out, but you still would have gotten credit for playing a Power 4 team. Maybe not a good Power 4 team, but that was the weirdest part to me is you took off a bad team. If you're scared, don't be scared of the. Yeah, I said something the other day that somebody yelled at me for, but just, not a good program. So anyway,
but they're not a good program. Like that's the other thing that's like really infuriating. Like USC versus Ole Miss a few years ago, we made fun of USC for canceling that game because initially we thought, okay, or let me rephrase that. Both USC and Ole Miss mutually agreed to cancel that game. So I'll make sure that I say that properly. That way it doesn't come off as USC being a scared little beat and stuff. But still, what I'm trying to get at is like you're scheduling like these are games that you can respect a little bit because of they're at least going to be promising matchups. Who's going to be the head coach at Virginia by the time that we see Kirk Cignetti play in Charlottesville? Who's going to be the starting quarterback? And if you really are as advertised, shouldn't you be able to win by double digits? Also, how big of a narrative would it be that the Big Ten is struggling if an ACC middle tier is beaten in a Big Ten team just in general? Like, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, we say that all the time when it's the SEC. Shouldn't we also say that about the Big Ten too?
I think Tom might be muted again. We're working through. I think anytime you come back in, it might mute you.
I don't know if I'm okay now, but
yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Sorry.
I think we figured it out. Hopefully.
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting, and but all that said, it's July 22nd. We're a month and a week away from the real game starting. A month away from week 0. I'm here for all the shots. Just keep bringing all the shots. Hopefully somebody says something reckless tomorrow at Big Ten or ACC as well because I enjoy it.